Today, I wanted to talk about a few tips that I have found very helpful in helping me learn Raqs Sharqi. Is it all inclusive? No, but this is a great list for you to start off on so that way you get a little bit more footing through your process. The first thing I want to bring up, which I find extremely important in learning Raqs Sharqi, is you have to study the culture and you have to study the people. To separate the two, the dance form and the culture and the people, is like separating peanut butter and jelly. No, I'm just kidding. It's definitely more significant than that. But if you really want to take on the nuances and understand how this art form came to be and how it developed through time, then we need to study the people who are performing this, the people who are learning this, who are the people who are doing it professionally, the people who are doing it casually, as well as just the daily interactions, the mannerisms that we see. Why is it this way in the culture, or why is it that way? Can we kind of pinpoint why that is? Why did that dancer do that? A lot of these questions can be answered if we immerse ourselves more in the culture and study the people. Look at their habits, look at what they do on their day-to-day lives, look at how they speak with people, how they interact between different genders, how they interact between the same gender. All of these aspects are really, really important and can make a huge difference in how you express yourself through this dance form and making sure that we respect and honor this culture. On that note, we want to be studying with native dancers. They have an understanding that non-native people don't and may never get, to be honest, at some point. It's just like relating to someone from your own culture. You have this kind of understanding about things that you're like, oh, you get it because you're from the culture. So this is really important to be studying with native people because they get it. They know. They lived it. They grew up in it. They understand. And so the more that we can be more directly associated with their teachings and their learnings, the more that we will grasp as non-native people, the more that we'll grasp the information, the more that we can digest what they have to offer, what they have to teach, as well as we should just be plain out supporting them because this is their art form and their culture, and we want to be respecting that and we want to be honoring that. On an education, through an education lens, studying with a native dancer is sometimes harder because maybe we can't travel to where they are, but that's really not an excuse nowadays because there are so many native dancers who are teaching online. So they're so much more accessible. It's really, really nice to be able to get so much great information from them. And honestly, it's less diluted. And I mean that because if you study, and I say this as a non-native dancer, if I'm studying from a non-native dancer who studied from a non-native dancer who then studied from a native dancer, that's like 3 generations removed, right? So it's not that it's wrong or bad necessarily, but the more dilution there is in the information, we need to be responsible for that, right? So we want to make sure that we're as close to the source as possible, and this helps us understand more about Raqs Sharqi and the nuances and the musicality and the structure and the movement and all this stuff. And so this will make it easier to study it as much as possible directly from a source versus several generations later. And I just want to caveat, there's nothing wrong with studying from non-native dancers. I think it's really healthy to have a blend of both, but I think we also have to be responsible for making sure that we support the native dancers, the native instructors, and that a lot of your information should come mainly from them. I think you'll notice a theme here. The next thing that I think can make learning Raqs Sharqi easier for yourself and just a little bit more digestible is to learn some common Arabic words, if not actually study the language, which I understand not all of us have the time to do so. But if we can study those common words that are used, like habibi, habibti, hob, layali, like all of these words, this is really helpful in us understanding the music more, so that way we get the feeling, we get the sense of what's happening, we get the essence of the song, so we can dance within that context. And that is really important because when you're learning it and you're trying to figure out context and what to do and what not to do, the more information you have in order to discern those things, the better. And learning those common Arabic words that are used in the music that we dance to is a great way to kind of break down that a little bit more and give yourself another strong footing into the art form. I was just going over this with my students the other day because we're talking about improvisation. And one of the tools that I realize we may or may not be using in a specific way is YouTube or any kind of video. So how you would use this more specifically in order to make Raqs Sharqi easier to learn is you want to find videos that have live music being played right there on the spot. You want to be able to see the musicians, you want to be able to see the instruments, and you want to be able to see the dancer if there is one. You don't necessarily have to have a dancer in the video for this specific reason. The reason why you want to see video of live music being played is it gives you the sense of the dynamic that has to happen between instruments to allow things to complement each other musically, as well as what sound is produced by a qanun, what sound is produced by an accordion. And if you can visually see when those instruments are being played, you can associate the sound with that instrument more easily. At least I found so because I'm a visual and kinesthetic learner. So anytime I have some kind of visual representation, I find it like, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful that I can see the accordion being played, I can see the ney being played, and then I can hear it at the same time. So when I listen to music, when I don't see a video of live musicians playing, then I understand how that comes across in canned music, or how that may come across in a recording of orchestral music, right? So then you have a better understanding of how to interpret the music with your body depending on the instrument that's being played. So I find that this is very, very important. So that way you start to understand when this instrument plays, you can move this way. When this instrument plays, we move this way. If it sounds like this instrument is being highlighted, am I right? Do I hear it correctly, right? Do I hear it accurately? So if you're testing yourself and you're saying like, okay, this instrument is being played, I think it's the oud. Let me see. And then you look down and you're testing yourself off the live music video so you can actually check it right there and then. So you look away and you're like, I think this is the oud being played. I think this is the oud being played. And then you look at the video and you see the oud being played. You're like, yes, score, 2 points, right? But if you're listening, you think it's the oud, but maybe it's another instrument. Maybe it's the qanun or whatever, or, and you're like, poop. I listened to it and I didn't hear with accuracy, right? So then you can kind of train and teach yourself how to listen to the instruments and make sure that you get them correctly, because then that helps us move more in sync and more seamlessly and complementary to the music when we dance. One of the things I find super important in your learning process is to learn to ask why. Not how, not what, and try and memorize choreography and whatnot, but really to ask why, especially when you're taking from native dancers and you're learning about the culture and the people. Ask, may I ask you, why do you do this? Why is this happening? What is the meaning behind this? Can you explain this to me a little bit more? We want to find the reasoning. And when we have the reasoning, we start to learn how to fish versus just being fed the fish. And this is really important in our process, because if you go on to create choreography, or you go on to improvise, or you go on to even teach others, we want to be responsible for that and learn like what is the purpose and the intention behind all of these things. So as much as you can ask why, this is really, really important. I found in my education, whenever my teacher would do something, I would ask why, but then also if it wasn't like an appropriate time to ask questions or anything like that, I would make a note in my notes and I would say, why did they do that? Why did they turn that way? Why did they bear their weight on this leg? Why are they generating movement from here? Like, I asked why about a lot of things. And then I found that it made it a lot easier for me to break down movement now. It made it a lot easier for me to understand culturally why these things were happening, because I kept asking why, so I could figure out the intention and the purpose of all these things. And you'll be surprised by some of the answers that come from you asking why. And I ask all the time, like even now, you never stop asking why, right? I ask teachers all the time, other teachers, I ask students, I'm like, why, or how did you do that? Or, or what made you drive from this area and whatnot, and figuring that out in that context really helps you solidify like how this art form is applied. So asking why, super, super important. So after you ask why, write it down, take notes. Note taking, is amazing, especially if it's on a handout that a teacher has given you so you can supplement the information that was already provided for you. This makes it so much easier to learn, as many of you already know, because you can take very specific notes, and there's lots of moments that happen that you want to record. You can take notes through video, you can take notes through physically writing, you can take notes through actually typing in your phone. But I found that as I learned more and more through Raqs Sharqi, the less note-taking I did, the harder it was for me to go back and recall the information, even through trigger words that I had put in the notes. And then I almost had to research the information because I just didn't note take it, which wasted time for me to train on something that I had already been exposed to. So it's really interesting when we don't take notes, because you might find yourself like, oh crap, I forgot, or whatnot, or you have to borrow someone else's notes. But then it's not quite the same when you borrow someone else's notes, because you didn't go through the physical act of taking them, and your brain remembers differently when you do the work in order to take the notes. So I find note taking really, really helpful in order to make sure your process of learning is easier, but also more efficient, because you're not going back to like double do some of the research. And when at least I did, I had to do some of it over because I didn't take good notes. At the time I was like, I'll remember. I don't know why I ever thought I could remember, because I never remember all this stuff. I have a crap ton of notes and a lot of Word documents with all my stuff on it, because you can't remember. There's no physical space in the brain, it feels like, right at the time. So the more note-taking you do, the easier it'll be for you to digest and process that information, and it's more likely to stay in your body where you can more consciously get it out and use it later. So this makes it easier. It makes it sometimes more accurate in the way that you dance and the way that you present Raqs Sharqi. So super, super important to take notes in whatever shape or form that you can do it in. For whatever reason you can't dance, you don't have the space, you don't have like the energy, anything like that, one way to really continue to practice your training and get better at Raqs Sharqi is through visualization. It's not some woo-woo thing. There is science behind it of you imagining and putting yourself in that environment through sight, sound, taste, feeling, smells, all that stuff, imagining the music, even listening to the music, but just visualizing yourself within that song makes a huge difference in your training. It is absolutely impactful to physically do the movement and train and read and learn and study, but there's also visualization, and where it can be applied, apply it. It really helps for you to go through those movements and even imagine and believing that you can do it yourself, versus, oh, you just kind of go through the movements and you're feeling awkward, as you're learning, and you're like, I'm a beginner, I've only started like 8 weeks and my body feels so awkward like this. Visualize yourself doing it smoothly, doing it with refinement, doing it with like nice technique. These things make a difference, and I swear, like all my students who follow through with the visualization, they see the difference in conjunction with when they can actually dance. So it's really, really impactful, and it's one of the ways we don't necessarily talk about all the time, and how we can make our process easier when we're learning a new art form. But it's really, really impactful, and you want to be able to help yourself in as much ways as possible to learn this. So try the visualization, imagine yourself in it, put yourself in that position, and I promise you, it'll help. Last but not least, talk to other people and seeing if they're getting it too. Meaning, if you are just starting out in Raqs Sharqi and you're like, ugh, this is really hard, or I feel awkward, or I did not understand anything from the last class, or this is way above my head, or anything like that, talk to other people in your class. See if they're feeling that way too. One, you don't want to feel alone. That just sucks. Two, you want to make sure it's not just you, right? Because if it is just you, maybe it's something like, am I in the right level of class? Do I have a certain expectation? Is the teacher just not appropriate for you, right? So you want to be able to consider these things with a more objective point of view, but it's really hard to do that when we don't share our experience with someone else. And you never know. It's like the question that, like, oh, if you have a question, probably someone else has that question. It's that. So you want to make sure like you have those conversations with your classmates. If you're new to a class, like get someone's number from the class. It'll be really nice. You can even have a dance accountability buddy. That's a great other way to actually help you learn Raqs Sharqi, is having an accountability person so you can keep training. But let's go back to the point, right? Is to share your personal experience with your teacher, with other people in the classroom, because then you get to make sure, am I on the right track? Am I where I'm supposed to be? Because a lot of the times, if I don't say, hey, you guys, this is where you are and this is perfect, this is part of the process, some people are like, oh, okay, that makes me feel better. You don't even realize how many people need to hear that. So you yourself may need to hear that too. So when we're learning this and we're going through it and there's a lot of struggles and even successes, we want to be able to get those validated, and we want to be able to be heard. And we also want to share our experience with others, because maybe they will share something with you that you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about it that way, but it helps your process in learning Raqs Sharqi. So it's really important to share your story wherever you can, and obviously whenever you're comfortable. Think about your classmates, think about your teachers, or think about someone else who isn't in your class, but is also a Raqs Sharqi dancer. I hope some of these were really helpful to you. Let me know your feedback. Let me know if you have other ways that you can make learning Raqs Sharqi much easier. That would be awesome. Share them below. If you haven't already subscribed to my channel, please do. And then you'll be notified once you make sure the little bell notification is on. You'll be notified when I upload more videos. And if you didn't already know, I also teach online dance classes. I have a beginning curriculum as well as an intermediate advanced curriculum, so definitely check those out.